Welcome to the Complete Twisted Iceberg. This is something I've been interested in doing for a long while now, kind of even before I started this whole YouTube thing, and it's something that is done for other medias out there. If you don't know what an iceberg is, it's essentially a chart showcasing topics pertaining to a certain media. The more well-known stuff is towards the top, and the farther down you go, the less known they become. This iceberg image will feature all sorts of topics from Twisted. Memorable tornadoes, updates, lore, secrets, and more. Of course, obviously not everything is included. Firstly, I will not be discussing drama at all during this video. Secondly, going before 1.17 is where things get very hazy, and information becomes very scarce. And if you've only played 2 and a quarter of an update, obviously things are going to be much more difficult without some people to help out at least. So huge thanks to those who provided images and footage, and special thanks will be given to them at the end. Regardless, all images from updates and events I did not take part in will have credits listed as they are on screen. And for any topics you may be interested in, I highly recommend you search for them. I want this video to sort of serve as a catalyst for people to learn what happened back then, and maybe check out someone's content as well. Sure, some of the stuff mentioned here is old, but I think it's pretty cool and it spreads Twisted's history much further. Well, let's get on with the topics. Roblox. I mean, this should be pretty self-explanatory. Twisted is a game that was made on Roblox. There's a lot of good aspects to that, like the game being very easy to access and free to play. However, it can cause a lot of issues because of Roblox's poor optimizations and memory cap. But it's always been the developer's goal to create a game that pushes the Roblox engine to its very limits. Hazleton, Hibbing, Viroqua, and Wadena. These towns are the 4 largest towns in the game. Hazleton essentially acts as your typical large metro area with taller buildings and higher quality homes. Hibbing is the quintessential lake town, Viroqua is a riverside town with roundabouts to reference Wisconsin, and Wadena is a much smaller suburban town. These towns all have structures that are able to withstand EF5 winds. Pink TVS equals EF5. This is a very common misconception with new players mistaking the TVS icons with the EF scale, like yellow TVS being EF2, pink TVS being EF5, and so on. But these are just 2 very different estimations of a tornado's strength that are to remain separate. This is something that does come up quite a bit in the Twisted community, and is often joked about. Wilza and Serism. These 2 are the main developers for Twisted. Wilza is the builder for the game, creating the entire map and structures, and Serism does the main coding for the game. It's actually pretty insane that with a smaller team, a lot of fantastic and huge updates can be pushed out for the game. Intercept vehicles. There are 5 tornado intercept vehicles currently in the game, Dominators 1, 2, and 3, as well as TIV-1 and TIV-2. These vehicles were used to chase and intercept real tornadoes, with Dominator 3 and TIV-2 still being in use today. All of the wind thresholds for the interceptors are just estimates, as it really isn't known how much they could withstand. All of the Dominator vehicles have faster deploy times, while the TIVs have a much higher threshold, mostly, with a slower deploy time. 1.21. 1.21 is the current update for Twisted that served as a large refresh from 1.20, introducing some more interesting mechanics like hydroplaning, customization, and the damage system. In a vacuum, it may not actually seem that much content-wise, but the entire game was recoded, and previous bugs that were in 1.20 have been mostly fixed. While there are some criticisms for it, like the shifting patterns, storm spawns, and tornado sizes being pretty crazy, it does keep the game random enough for enjoyment, and there is much better balancing on a surface level. Keysota. This is the fictional state the game is based in. Keysota's name comes from a combination of the Florida Keys and Minnesota. However, the map itself is based mostly on Minnesota, as well as some areas from Wisconsin and Dixie Alley. One 1.20 is the biggest update ever to be pushed out at the time. Consisting of almost a full revamp from 1.19, this update introduced revamped storms, radar, tornadoes, and map. This is also sort of where the game had the split of 1.19 and before being referred to as Old Twisted, and 1.20 and after being referred to as New Twisted. While 1.20 had a lot of positive feedback on the initial release, its problems would poke out way more throughout its lifetime. Welchel and Welchel Valley. These are 2 unincorporated areas west of Hazleton. They were first introduced in 1.15, then removed, and introduced in 1.20, then they're getting removed again. The two places serve as open areas with mobile homes, sort of like a combination between Trent and Nateville, I'd say. Composites. On the thermodynamics page, you can find two numbers marked by STP and VTP. STP is significant tornado parameter, and VTP is violent tornado parameter. STP is the likelihood of an EF2 plus tornado happening, and VTP is the likelihood of an EF4 plus tornado happening. Note that these are just estimates, and please note that they are just rough calculations of the thermodynamics, and aren't an actual rating of the risk's overall performance. TIV2 versus Dominator 3. A long-winded debate on which vehicle is better, TIV2 or Dominator 3. It mostly depends on your playstyle. Do you like attacking the tornadoes much quicker? Use Dominator 3. Do you prefer to be safer in a tornado but take things at a slower pace? Use TIV2. There are many perspectives on this debate though, and whatever you pick is up to you. But the general consensus is that TIV2 lands on top, because its disadvantage, that being deploy time, is only really an issue when looking at the skill level of a player, such as them not being able to deploy in time. So, in other words, it's a skill issue. But both vehicles are great at intercepting violent tornadoes, so if you prefer one over the other for your playstyle, that's perfectly fine. Rerolling. Rerolling is a term when players rejoin a private server constantly to get better thermodynamics. You are able to do this with buying a VIP server or using someone else's link. And you just click and join the leave buttons until you get something you want. While sometimes getting a good risk you want can be good, it is important to not roll an insane amount of times on end, trying to feel like you're gonna win it big. I mean, I wouldn't know though, I'm still rerolling. One more. One more. One more. One more. One. Hourglasses. Hourglasses were a common tornado mesh in 1.17 to 1.19. Hourglasses were sort of like barrels in 1.21. Their wind fields were large and they could also be very wide. There was the criticism of the mesh not being very visually appealing, and that it wasn't realistic to real life, but others liked the shape being very different compared to the rest of the meshes in the game. 1.18 and 1.19. These two updates are considered the golden updates for Twisted. That's not true, I made that up. They are very popular though. 1.18 served as a revamp from 1.17, adding in more color variations and the epic circle storms, of which the circle storms likely helped create different storm structures and allowed tornadoes to grow the hook. 1.19 actually received some criticism on release. 1.19 was basically just a quality of life update from 1.18, but some stated that the lighting from 1.19 wasn't as vibrant as 1.18's, and it was a lot more grayscale, though it was noted to be the most balanced update out of all aspects, and it did have a lot of charm and chaotic nature without going too overboard. Stalling glitch. This is a common bug that occurs more and more often on laggier servers at random points. If you play Twisted, or you have played Twisted and haven't gotten the stalling glitch, yes you have. Basically, when you jump out of the vehicle and get back in, there's a chance you won't be able to move. The only way to fix it is just to jump out and back in again. This can put you in a really bad spot after placing probes, because it can waste a bunch of time if you get it too many times and if you miss your driver's seat. I hate this bug, I hate it so much I put it on the list. You have no idea how many times I've died of this bug. It's in like multiple videos. Winaska, Waukesha, and Wiltonville. Three very popular towns originating from 1.19 that were all replaced in 1.20. Winaska was a small village area similar to Elmora, located in the center of the map, and it was replaced by Prior Lake. Waukesha was a Starbucks-sized town with expected houses, meaning it could be rated EF4. This was replaced by Wabun. And lastly, Welchenville, which was about the size of Wadena and held a Wilmart, meaning it could be rated EF5. This town was replaced by Gebel. Helma. Helma is a ghost town just east of Prior Lake. It's a pretty interesting and unique area for the game, with probably the largest lore presence for a town in the game. Helma is based off of Pitcher, Oklahoma, which was an old mining town that began to lose its population because of the toxic environment. This was caused by a large amount of toxic chat piles in the area, and in 2008, a tornado would strike it and destroy a lot of the buildings that were left. After that, it was then deemed as a ghost town. In Helma, there are decayed homes, chat piles, and uranium mines. The uranium mine itself was originally a joke, and it was added in 1.18 afterwards. Desensitization. Desensitization refers to the idea that some Twisted players have gotten their standards to go higher and higher based on what they perceive to be strong or rare. While having some standards to make the game more fun is acceptable, like, don't try to bore yourself completely, it still is important to try to keep the standards from getting too high, just simply because the game will become less enjoyable for you, and it will become harder to replicate what made the strong tornadoes so special in the first place. Try not to burn yourself out. Try some new things for the game. Use different vehicles, play lower end risks because they can actually outperform the higher end ones, and take pictures. Just anything that you think would make the game more fun. 400 plus. For the game's run, it's always been seemingly impossible for a tornado to reach 400 miles per hour naturally. 1.20 got close, however 1.21 completely shattered that. So far, 3 or maybe even more tornadoes have reached 400 miles per hour. The first one was 400 exactly, occurring on a 6.1 public server, which is stupid. Then another at 413, with one of the most violent couplets seen in 1.21, occurring on a 13.3. And finally at 432 subvortice or wind gust off of an already violent tornado. And for the 413 tornado, it was actually stated there was a suspected 460 mile per hour reading, though it was never proven. Interesting that 1.21 was able to break the 400 plus mark before 1.20 did though. Barrels. A barrel is a particular tornado shape in 1.21 where, up to a certain size, the tornado can change from a normal wedge shape into a more cylinder shape. This usually happens when the tornado reaches 2,000 feet, and a pretty common characteristic of these tornadoes is their wind fields are insanely massive while the couplet is basically minimum size. If a barrel tornado continues to grow, it can slap multiple cities from miles away. They actually have their fair share of criticisms because they tend to look very wonky and not like actual tornadoes, and it becomes more apparent the bigger they get. 1.22. 1.22 is the next update for Twisted, rivaling 1.20 in terms of size. This update will also feature the entire map revamp, with the map being much larger and featuring much more towns. Hazleton is likely to be a large urban area now, including more suburban areas around it, though the rest of the town sizes are pretty much unknown. There is no pinpointed release date for it, however the developers are aiming for it to be released this winter. 8 Mile Wide. This tornado is weird. So basically an 8 mile wide tornado occurred on a natural public server, and I kid you not, it slabbed all or nearly the entire map. Chandler, Mizpah, and Peshiga were slabbed from the tornado being just west of Hazleton. So you're probably like, man, that track must have been pretty wide, huh? Measured out, the track was 2 miles wide, but the statistics listed it as 8.57 miles wide, which is about the distance from Waban to Wadena, by the way. And the tornado was at night and rain wraps, so there was no telling on how large it really was, and all we know is that the wind field extended past the map. 10 Killer. Before 1.20, 10 Strike's name used to be 10 Killer. 10 Killer is a small town in Oklahoma, while 10 Strike is in Minnesota. The name likely changed in 1.20 because of Roblox being stingy with its moderation, especially with the VAS voice saying the word killer out loud. Tornado meshes. These are basically what the tornadoes are made out of in-game, just some 3D models that rotate. Tornado meshes throughout the game's life have changed a lot, however. Starting with 1.15 and 1.16, they were simply just cone shapes that grew bigger. 1.17 introduced the different mesh types, where pre-made meshes would be used, and the tornado could switch between them at any point to create more variety. Lastly, 1.20 introduced the sphere mesh tornadoes. How this works is there is a bunch of sphere meshes stacked on top of each other, and they would rise up evenly. This was done so the tornadoes could create interesting shapes when moving around, and sidewinders come to life with these meshes. .17. We're getting to older territory now. 1.17 is yet a large change from the previous 1.16, most notably introducing different tornado meshes, which added some extra visual flair and kept the tornadoes more interesting. This was an update looked upon fondly, like 1.19. 331. 331 was a very notable tornado for Twisted content creation. First uploaded by Tofu and Jesse, this tornado was a short-lived wind speed record from 1.17.1. The tornado would slab Waukesha at a width of 1.4 miles wide and with winds up to 331 miles per hour. Maybe that's why Waukesha was replaced. Sylvia. Sylvia is a memorial town added in the initial release of the game. You may notice 3 concrete slabs and a monument by the gas station. These allude to a tornado that happened in the game's timeline that destroyed a large portion of the town. Sylvia doesn't really reference any player experience in-game or any town in real life, as the area it gets its name from is a lake and it's been around since release, so there wouldn't have been any experiences to begin with. 2.5 mile wide. This tornado is the definition of an unbeatable record. It only happened 7 days after 1.19 got released, and it managed to be the widest tornado on a natural server. At a width of 2.5 miles wide and 330 mile/hour winds, this tornado slapped both of the Veroclos, and did the signature 1.19 checkmark shift, because they kinda all did that. This tornado was a surprising start to 1.19's long run, and for a while it would remain the largest tornado in Twisted history up until 1.21, not including event servers. This tornado was also able to beat the max width record on the 10 million Cape video done by Tofu and Jesse, which just shows how insane this record actually is. Sneed. Sneed is another area in the game with a large lore presence, like Sylvia. The town features a crumbled schoolhouse foundation and a very rundown shelter, alluding to a past tornado in the game's timeline. The Sneed River Dam is also a highlight as it provides some Easter eggs and a unique interior. Although back in 1.18 it used to be a power plant that was actually destructible, unlike the River Dam. Sneed is based off of Sneed, Arkansas, a ghost town completely wiped off the map by an F5 tornado in 1929. 388. 1.20 was a pretty strange update, and one of the most notable things about it was just how high the wind speeds could reach. One of the tornadoes that was amongst the strongest was the 388 tornado. This occurred on a 14.4 risk that was able to beat the wind speed record for 1.20 at the time. It should be noted that this tornado was likely stronger than 388, possibly reaching the upper 390s. This is because the probe that got the record wind speeds was placed in the northwestern side of the tornado. Had the probe been in the core winds or on the eastern side, it might have been more violent. 359. 359 miles per hour is the record for the strongest tornado in 1.19. The tornado intensified very rapidly and it completely slapped Sire in the process. Even though the official wind speed record was 359 by screenshot, some players reportedly received 360 winds on their probes. However, screenshots were never provided, so it was never called a record. It's 1 mile per hour though, so it's probably true. This tornado was especially rare because of the extreme luck needed to get a tornado above 340 winds in 1.19. Even 300 was really difficult as well. .398. This is the record wind speed for 1.20. Although really the most interesting thing about the tornado is its strength, as it actually wasn't very large, nor did it hit anything interesting. There is a bit of a mystery about its strength though, because only one person chased it, and it might have been still strengthening after it was probed. At the time, it was suspected that the tornado wind speed cap was said to be 398 exactly, though it was very hard to prove as you needed a tornado to reach that in the first place. Overcast. Overcast was a feature from 1.19 where if the sky was totally covered by clouds, then the thermodynamics would always underperform from the forecasted thermodynamics. This would cause forecasted risk to be hindered potentially and might make the day result as a bust. There was a very, very small chance that the day would still overperform, but it was basically zero. This was a common complaint amongst players because it meant that you would have to keep re-rolling for a whole lot more potentially, when you really just got a good risk that happened to be ruined by Overcast, which is just a luck-based thing. 10 million event. The 10 million event was done for Twisted celebrating 10 million visitors. So the developers made it so every risk on the weekend was a high risk. Many players got to experience the true chaos of 1.19 during that time, with many insane tornadoes occurring, including an insane 2.68 mile wide tornado that completely slapped Hibbing. This tornado also had wind speeds of 351 miles per hour, making it 2 records on the 10 million event, and it was able to beat the natural width record, and it almost beat the wind speed record as well. Andrusia. Andrusia throughout its lifetime has received some downgrades to the home quality and it lost its lake, but it has retained a pretty interesting detail. Just to the east of the town, currently, there is a rundown farm with a slabbed home and shelter. It has been called to my attention that this is actually referencing the beginning scene of Twister. Andrusia is a pretty underrated spot for its terrain and of course the lore, but it's never really an area people go to that much because of the low road access and tornadoes being hard to come by in that area. BSP was here, and Rip Fonz. These are two pieces of text under the dashboard of the 2008, 2009, and 2010 versions of the Div 2. Fonz was a modeler for Twisted who has retired from larger projects for Twisted, while BSP was a modeler for these variants of Div 2. 1.20 criticisms. This topic is fairly subjective, however 1.20 did face a lot of criticism amongst players. A lot of players had agreed that the gameplay and storm behavior was just too repetitive, with tornadoes constantly shifting north and the storm spawns spawning in the same areas. The storm spawns were also pretty bad a good portion of the time, which caused most of them to be unchaseable. It was also incredibly easy to get 300 plus tornadoes in the update, which caused a lot of people to get burnt out of it, and it made them way less special. The update was not optimized as well as the previous ones, and it was prone to lag and crashing, which was a huge issue. 1.21 did come to the rescue though, and it seems like the game is back up on its feet. Many do agree that this was Twisted's lowest point to an extent, however another large portion of players agree that it was a great update. So if this is Twisted's lowest point, I'd say the game is pretty great overall. Trent. This is a town originating in 1.18 based off of a goofy Roblox moderator. Back when 1.17.1 was about to be released, Wilza was banned from Roblox for a day because he had been suspected of uploading loud audio to the Roblox studio. It was really just some engine sounds for vehicles, and it was obviously not a very just ban. And this also meant that the 1.17.1 update had to be delayed by a day because of it. He later sent an appeal for it and was denied by a moderator named Trent. So, in retaliation in 1.18, Wilza added a town called Trent with really rough terrain and lower quality homes to resemble Roblox moderation. Honestly, that's really cool. Keep the town in the game for that one. 227. 227 is a number that pops up a lot in Twisted. Its origins come from a 1.16 and later a 1.17 boosted server that had 227 as a temperature. It became a running joke in the community after that. Many people have said it is a number that comes up a questionable amount of times outside and inside of Twisted. Hospital slabbers. During 1.20, there was one structure many people had their eyes on for a large amount of damage, and that was the Keystone Health Hospital. This is because it was the strongest structure in the game, being well over 300 miles per hour before it gets fully slabbed. However, two tornadoes have managed to do it so far. The first one occurred in 1.20 on a 15.4 risk, where the last tornado stalled over Hazleton and it left it fully damaged, including the hospital. While the tornado was over the town, the tornado was estimated to be 390 plus, based off of a 355 Dow scan, which was a record at the time. Afterwards, the tornado was thought to have been possibly 400 plus because of the scan evidence, and also that the hospital was thought to be fully slabbed at 400 miles per hour. It was later reported from the developers that the hospital gets fully slabbed at 345. And 1.21, there was a second hospital slabber also in Hazleton. There isn't too much information on this tornado, but it is noted to be not as violent as the first one. The strength of the first one will forever stay unknown, however. April Fool's event. Way back in 1.15, an April Fool's event was hosted for Twisted. The thermals weren't boosted, but other wacky stuff happened. Storms could be different colors, there was a Google car for a storm chasing vehicle, tornadoes could flip upside down, the skybox had random things swapped with the moon. I'm honestly curious if Twisted would ever be interested in doing something like this again. 1.98 mile wide. This is the record width tornado for 1.20, and compared to 1.20's wind speed lineup and other updates' largest tornadoes, it seems really pitiful, right? Tornadoes larger than a mile were extremely rare to combine 1.20, and the only reason why this tornado occurred is because of a recycle off of an abnormally large thunderstorm risk and a high risk which can create some weird effects, which we'll get into later. Mr. Gray. This is an Easter egg NPC character found currently in Gemmel. He actually used to be located near Welchonville in 1.19. There isn't really a clear reason for his existence, he just does. Nate. Nate is also an NPC character found in Nateville, and has been there since the town's addition in 1.17. He disappears if the structure is even slightly damaged, however. This NPC is probably where the town gets its name, or vice versa. Risk stacking / risk carrying. Risk stacking is a term most commonly used in 1.20. It's definitely one of the more anomalous sides of Twisted. Risk stacking was the original term for this, where it was theorized that when the clock reaches 12 a.m., the thermodynamics would all stack up for a period of time, and it would cause any tornado that was still strengthening to rapidly intensify. This was later proven to be most likely false, as there would have been much more violent tornadoes, way more often if the thermodynamics truly stacked numbers. Later on, the term was changed to risk carrying, where at 12 a.m. some other variable would cause the tornadoes to strengthen rapidly. That meant that any day afterwards was capable of risk carrying with the day before. This is where most of the record-breaking tornadoes, especially in February 2023, would happen. It didn't always work though. Sometimes the tornadoes, even after the thermodynamics change, would carry on as normal, which would beg the question if risk stacking or carrying even exists. The main explanation I could find, or people have given me, is that it was some sort of invalidation of the day 1 thermos, meaning that when the day switches over, the tornado essentially forgets the thermodynamics it was on before, and it is allowed to strengthen much more than it was previously going to. There really isn't a concrete answer, and in 1.21, it's not really something you come across anymore, at least in a notable way. Some think it still exists, some think it doesn't anymore, and some think it never even existed at all. Pink Couch. On the little island in the Wenatchee River near Viroqua, you can find the lone pink couch facing to the west. This is an indestructible object as well, so you can sit and watch the sunset after your 104 Viroqua tornadoes this update. Why are there so many Viroqua tornadoes this update? 10-degree lapse rates. Back in 1.19, there was a very strange bug with the thermodynamics where getting 10-degree lapse rates would cause any current risk to perform pretty terribly. It was said that this would happen more often than the risk performing well, so you'd have basically a guaranteed bust. So if you had a 7k cape risk with 10 laps, then it would almost always fail. Whitehaven and Maysville. Whitehaven and Maysville are forgotten towns that were in one of the first builds of Twisted. Maysville was its own standalone town, while Whitehaven actually was meant to be the main metro area instead of Hazleton, though it was eventually swapped. Both towns were removed in the first release of Twisted and show no signs of return. Bugged thermodynamics. Okay, this topic is a little out there, however, it is definitely an interesting thought to have. The idea that there are certain thermodynamic sets that may be bugged to produce insane outbreaks for seemingly no reason. There's really only one example that I know of that could have been doing this. During 1.18, Fusion rolled a enhanced risk with this set of thermos. The first tornado was a 1.3 miler with winds recorded at 247 miles per hour. And the second tornado was exactly 1 mile wide. An enhanced risk producing something even close to this is insanely rare. But was it just a fluke? Later on, Fusion would roll a moderate risk underperform with almost the exact same thermodynamics, and what this will produce was the record holder for the widest tornado on a moderate risk, which was 1.5 miles wide. Getting 2 low-level risks to produce such violent and wide tornadoes, even back then, would be extremely rare. So, was something with these set of thermodynamics possibly bugged? It's not impossible given that the 10 lapse rates were also glitched in 1.19, and there was also certain sweet spots in some of the values. We may never know, as 1.19 was announced not soon after. Beltrami Valley. Beltrami Valley is an unknown area on the western side of the map. This was introduced in the first release of the game all the way to 1.15, and that's all I can really say about it. Weirdly, there isn't much information on Beltrami Valley, and I couldn't really tell if it had any homes at all, or if it was an area with slightly different terrain. So I'm just gonna say, it's not real. No, it's not real, that's it. 1.18's wind speed record is actually fairly low amongst the other updates. The wind speed record is likely 318 and was a 1.1 mile wide that slapped Hazleton from just being in the wind field. This tornado was likely even stronger than 318, and more so in the 320 plus range as it kept growing after the tornado was probed and it went off map. There was a mention of a 333 mile per hour tornado happening somewhere, but I couldn't really find anything confirming its existence, so maybe it was confirmed privately or it just wasn't. And if it was, it might have been within the last days of 1.18 being out, as 318 was noted to be the record until then, and it could explain why the alleged 3-3 winds went under the radar. 300 mile per hour glitch. In 1.17, there was a pretty strange bug where players and vehicles would just not get picked up by tornadoes with over 300 miles per hour. This meant that you could just walk in it and place a rope for free, and you could just watch the landscape crumble while you stand perfectly still. It is pretty interesting that this started at 300 miles per hour. Like, it's pretty specific.
Stop sign.
This was an old sign in Welchenville that is just meant to be a little Easter egg, though it was removed in 1.20 sadly. There probably is no big reason why it was added, probably just something cool to find within the hundreds of stop signs on the map. 341 mile per hour tornado. On one of the last months of 1.17's existence, a highly unprecedented 341 probe image was posted. The tornado occurred on a public server with a width of 1.2 mile wide over Funkley. Like many other records, this tornado was reported to have higher winds than the proof that was given. The highest said here was 346. It's actually pretty interesting that everything before 1.19 wasn't as well documented though. Oh man, that was quite a while. Sorry that took so long to get out. I wanted a bit of a break to think about what I wanted to do with this video, and just to kind of relax a bit. Huge thanks to all these guys for providing images and footage, as well as some external help as well. It really wouldn't exist without their help. Let me know what you guys think of this video. It's surely a never done thing for Twisted, so it's pretty new. Also, something I'm really curious about is doing this for every upcoming update for Twisted. So at the end of 1.22 for instance, I can make another Iceberg video on that, but no promises on this. This video took a very long time to make. Thanks for sticking around to the end, but we still have one more topic left. Lastly, the most secretive thing of all. So secret that only few know. I will now tell everyone in the audience that the Pink Thunder hex code is